Hello everybody and welcome to the video. Today we're going to be looking at the 2025 NFL Draft tight end class. Not the strongest group, but there are some guys I like and some wild cards and some guys I can project to be pretty good. And if you guys have seen this channel before, you know I'm not typically this red. I'm not the strawberry man. I'm not any of that. The sun burnt me pretty good and it is my own fault, as some burns typically are. Push that aside and we'll go ahead and hop right into these tight end rankings. And to no one's surprise, Colston Loveland is my tight end one of this class, but it's not like unanimously, and I kind of actually have him in the same tier as the number 2 guy, and I'll probably just be the lowest on Colston Loveland you hear, and everyone's saying he's tight end 1 out by far. I'm not the exact same, like I'm not there on that page yet. I need to see quite a bit in 2024, but obviously I still have him here as my tight end 1, and we'll hop into why, and then why I might be a little bit lower on him. Obviously he's a very quick and easy mover. He is very athletic and a very fluid athlete. When you talk about hips, footwork, and the way that he runs routes, it just looks like some of the better guys in the NFL while he's a junior at Michigan. Colston Loveland, like I said, quick, easy, fluid, all that applies to the way you're talking about his athletic profile and the way that he just moves as a 6'5", 240, 245 human being. He even takes some boundary reps, and boundary corners, you know, still lose against him, whether it's his size, whether it's him in his longer strides, that's able to separate a little bit, but he's, you know, still winning against boundary corners, which says a lot less, you know, at the college level. I don't see if playing out wide, if he's just man-to-man with a boundary corner in his first couple of years in the league or whatever, I wouldn't expect it to be the same and translate quite like it is in college right now, but he still ends up beating boundary corners as a tight end, like I said, 6'5", 245 human being. From what I saw, his hands looked pretty good. I wouldn't go out and say like best in the class. Caden Prieskorn and Mitchell Evans both had some pretty impressive hands, as tight ends typically do. I don't get it. Maybe it's because like they're big and strong and they clamp that ball and it just looks like a very sticky, if you will. That's kind of like the best way I can phrase it. But Colston Loveland, his hands look pretty good. I wouldn't say best in the tight end class. He can turn up field and get going pretty quick and pretty fast. Once he's going, he could be good for 10 yards after contact. And what I mean, I guess better way to sum this up would be catch the ball, turn up field, gets going to top speed pretty quick, maybe sheds a block or runs someone over, and he could be good for another 10 yards. Or someone trips him or whatever, he still gets his feet under him, and then he can still go until he meets the next level of defenders. Like, there's just multiple ways that I can go, but I just thought his process of gathering himself and getting upfield was very quick for a tight end. And now we'll look at some of the downside for Colston Loveland, what I think is his biggest downfall. I think he's quite the liability as a blocker. He can't be important or lead block in heavier sets. He really struggles with power, and man, it's not good. I don't think that we're talking about, you know, he's like the 3rd worst blocker. I think he's the worst blocking tight end in this class, and there are guys smaller that aren't, you know, tight ends. But when you're talking true tight ends, when you're looking at tight end prospect, and specifically your number 1 tight end prospect, that should be one of their strengths. And I can't say the same for Colston Loveland. Every single bad play I saw on tape and I thought was, hey, that's noteworthy bad, it was blocking related or physicality related. He barely could block boundary corners because of their movement skills. The way he'd look at a linebacker, he could get moved by a linebacker. At his size, that's not like embarrassing, but he just needs to polish some things up and really prove himself there. Because what I see, I personally don't think the public sees the tape in what I'm seeing, but there's definitely hype for Loveland. I think people are getting a little crazy with some of the stuff they're saying. He was pretty good and had like 650 yards, but mostly because of that run heavy offense. He could have projected and had way more, but it seems people want another Bowers or a prospect of that caliber, and that just isn't Colston Loveland. At least from what I saw in 2023, maybe he makes these strides and becomes much better, or maybe comes back for a senior year. That's kind of besides the point. He's a great athlete and all, but still needs to improve when it comes to the physicality of the game. Sure, he's a willing blocker and seems to be a high effort and high energy type of player or teammate, but he's on the sideline recharging a lot because of the run heavy scheme and how bad he was at blocking, taking periods off the field, sitting on the sideline, energizing. But he's a very athletically gifted player that has a very high ceiling. And yes, he is still my tight end 1 because of that ceiling, but he needs to work on a few things to come out a different player and to maintain that status for me. And like I said, I'm probably going to be the lowest on Colston Loveland here because I do think blocking is a big part of the NFL as well. And sure, he'll have time to develop that part of his game in the league, and people won't see it as big as I do. And I still will see the hate comments or whatever people have to say about this. I still have him as my tight end 1. I believe in the ability. I said he's a improving and high energy, high effort type of player. Maybe once we see a little bit more consistent, play from Colston Loveland, AJ Barner isn't there, and I don't know, I don't really stay in tune with college football that much unless these are, draft prospects. So Colston Loveland, prove me wrong, please. And people are going to be pretty upset, but I still have him tight end 1, still my favorite, and still very good. And now we'll have the Notre Dame senior tight end, Mitchell Evans, coming in at 6'5", 260, huge human being. And I think he's a very solid blocker. He'll miss everyone or miss someone every 20 plays, but man, he can deal with an edge rusher or put guys on the ground, maybe clear out that second level as good as anyone. And I really do like Mitchell Evans in the way and the strength and the reliability in the blocking game. He's also pretty strong after the catch. He stands through plenty of defenders' attempts and tackles and whatnot, and just keeps his feet churning forward and never really stops. Just always wants to get that extra 2 yards or whatever. He's dog pile or people trying to get him, and people are chopping at his legs, going at his upper body while his legs are pinned down, and he's still gonna fall forward. He just has this will about him that keeps him pushing after the catch. He's also pretty good at finding space underneath and sits down in some of the open spaces, helps his quarterback out, kind of works with what the defense is giving him, turns around and helps his quarterback, like I mentioned, and that'll be Riley Leonard, a guy I'm kind of high on as a quarterback, and we'll see how that connection kind of works out, but I do think Mitchell Evans does that very well. His hands look really good, from highlight catches to reaching out of his frames and just making the easy catches. All of the above, every single spot kind of checked a box for me, where I was looking at, okay, can he catch down by his knees, out of his frame, looked pretty easy for him, really natural. And then I talked about some of these tight ends, and someone we'll talk about later, Caden Prieskorn, who's like, you could reach up and really snatch the football, but he also had some really nice highlight catches and showed time after time that I was like, okay, like the hands kind of just stood out. Flashes some of that good short area quickness, and especially for his size, 6'5", 260 is what he's listed at. I would assume he's probably a little bit lighter than that, but it leads to some great routes and some pretty good pivots time to time, and just makes some of that unexpected separation. Linebackers like, all right, I got him, I can kind of move with him, and then all of a sudden, takes like that one step and it's pretty quick, and then he has that separation, and as long as he can keep that going for 5 yards or whatever, he opens a window for the quarterback. You can kind of get more elaborative with what I'm trying to say, but I just think he had some good short area quicks for his size. And we'll talk about, and I don't really want to speculate, and this is purely speculation, but it almost looked like he played hurt. He was stumbling and stayed on the ground for a while and had some poor balance time to time. Like again, purely speculation. It almost looked like he played hurt. I know he has a torn ACL. I think that's the injury he got. I didn't know that until I think last week or sometime after I had done my tight end rankings and watched all the tape. Evan should probably watch out for some of those holding calls. He had a strong grip, or has a strong grip, and that's how he wins with blocks and whatnot. But there's times it gets too obvious, or he gets too grabby into the point where it's, not obviously a hold, but it's like, okay, you can let go, please. Straight line speed is kind of a mystery. He tempos and shows glimpses. He tempos his routes around and whatnot, but for the most part, he looks pretty slow. And I mentioned kind of had those good short area quicks for his size, but I don't know if that translates into like long speed. But again, tempo, some of his routes never really runs like a straight, like you never see a tight end just go on a typical 9 route unless they're trying to shred the seam. And even when they're doing that, they're trying to stay between a safety and a linebacker. So they're going to tempo down in a certain area. So it's just tough to tell, especially with tight ends. And then you get to Mitchell Evans and it just gets a little bit tougher. So Mitchell Evans a little different, and like I said, kind of a mystery. When you're talking about Evans, he's more of a blocking possession tight end that can block an edge rusher, then the next play go out and carve up a defense up the seam, make a highlight catch, help his quarterback through the course of a game, maybe get some critical third downs. I like Mitchell Evans quite a bit. I loved what I saw on tape, enough to put him in the same tier as Colston Loveland, who everyone is far and out like the best tight end. And when you're looking at guys that are number 1 in this class at each position, it's most clearly Colston Loveland at tight end over everybody else in that tight end class. Might not have made sense It barely made sense in my own mind. Anyways, let's move to the next one. And it's the Iowa product, Luke Lachey, up next. Senior, another senior, 6'6", 253, a little bit bigger. I think he's another guy that's pretty great when he's working with the quarterback. Maybe trying to sit down in open spaces, tempoing his routes, just seems to understand that whole dynamic and connection with the quarterback. I really like the way that he kind of played in those gaps. In all caps, I have written down, never stops blocking. He was a trench warrior in 2023 and just never stopped, didn't take any snaps off, and was just grinding away in the trenches. One of the bigger guys we talked about, 6'6", 253, got some leverage behind him, and honestly, some of that height and whatnot can create some torque and have some good blocking reps. But it wasn't like, oh, he had a few every game that stood out. Like, he's just constantly blocking, and whether or not they're all like A+ blocks, I don't care. Just keep a B blocking grade for a whole entire game. I'll take that over 3 A+ blocks and you missing some of the downs. I don't know where that analogy or whatever I'm trying to say came up with, but it's how I feel. Talking about a little bit of that physicality at his size as well. He can have guys draped on him, trying to tackle him. He's still barely hindered, and he's good when catching in traffic and fighting contact there too. Someone that can just really big man catch the ball. Someone's trying to tackle him. It doesn't matter. He shrugs it right off and works and does that sort of the game a little bit better too. We talked about like physicality. We'll get to some of the bad stuff, and I thought route running was something that stood out. His definition of like route running is running the exact path you see on a playbook. So if it's like a crosser and it literally does that, he's going to run that exact same line and then just shove guys out of the way. As long as he, a linebacker's in the way, he's going to check him and get him out of there. He's playing hockey while the rest of the people are playing football, and he doesn't really just make that separation. He more pushes guys out of the way and sees where it goes from there. But like I said, is definitely just running that exact same thing he sees on paper. And if anyone tries to, get in his way or enter his path, he's gonna check you out. I think his movement skills definitely slowed down in 2023 when you're comparing it to 2022. He also got a bit bigger and much stronger, so take some, lose some. I prefer I don't know, actually, his movement skills in 2022 were something that stood out, and then 2023 just seemed to slow down. It seemed like stuff, he built up some of that. Maybe while he's hurt, put on a few extra pounds. I was going to say dip to In-N-Out, but I don't think they have that in Iowa. Maybe he went to Burger King or whatever with the boys too much, and he wasn't working it off. So before the season starts, start hitting that weight room, get jacked, and all of a sudden he's this big, huge guy, and he's not moving as well as he was in 2022. But like I said, it got much stronger. So take some, lose some. When I watched the 2022 tape, I was impressed. And then I watched the 2023 tape, and it looks like he got a lot bigger, and he looked a little bit slower. And he's still strong as hell and kept impressing in 2023, following up from what I saw in 2022, where he was still competing with Sam Laporta for some reps in the tight end spot at Iowa. Caden Prieskorn, Ole Miss's senior tight end, 6'5", 255. Another senior, another big guy, and we'll talk about it. With some of the bigger guys in this class, we've talked about them being good blockers, high motors and whatnot, but I don't think Caden Prieskorn is a dominant blocker, but he can get the job done on normal tight end blocking assignments. A few things here and there kind of get away from him when you're talking about, blocking edge rusher one-on-one. I don't think he's that type of, big guy. I like awesome hands. All right, he can catch with one hand. He he actually did that more often than you'd think, and can also catch in traffic pretty well, and just looks good for him. 2 hands up and he can catch the ball. 1 hand up, he still catches the ball. A guy right next to him or trying to hit him, or a linebacker's on him or catching in traffic, he can do that too. I liked his hands quite a bit. I also like the filled out frame. If he's going to lack some of that athleticism, I'm glad he's still a little bit, bigger and plays with some of that heavy presence, I guess, instead of skinny and unathletic, still 245 but doesn't move. I'm glad that he's like 6'5", 255, a little heavy, and still doesn't really move that well, instead of having, basically, I'll put it this way, I'd rather him have size and a little less athleticism than no size and no athleticism. And we just talked about, it doesn't really look that fast and isn't fast. Some guys look slow but actually have some play speed with the ball in their hands. Not Caden. I don't think he's quite the same in those sort of perspectives. Also a little bit bigger, and so when he gets going, or when his play speed is up, he's carrying a lot of weight behind him. Below the waist tackles seem to be pretty effective and hinder him quite a bit. I think also another pretty important thing, the offensive schemed him open more than he actually got open. When you're looking at, like, Mitchell Evans did a great job of, like, okay, sitting down in his zone, that's not the scheme. Riding him up into a good area where it's Caden Prieskorn at Ole Miss, just runs a shallow crosser all the way down until the flat is vacated, no linebackers with him, and he's wide open. And that's where he gets like his yak opportunities. He never really just gets open in his game. And like I said, not a dominant blocker, get the normal jobs done, the typical tight end assignments that you get. But movement blocks seem to be a struggle for him as well. I think he needs to anchor down more and kind of, you know, settle in before he's making blocks, because he's making blocks on the move and he's not big enough to like shove a guy over. The guy can still stay with him and then he's on the move right away. And so they just like wrap around and get past him or whatever the deal is for Caden, but just not really a movement or, you know, big blocker guy. He's big and honestly not very agile or athletic as a whole. He does make some pretty impressive catches and big plays for Ole Miss though, something you kind of have to factor in. Like, sure, not really as sexy as some of the other guys, but man, he still goes out and has big plays, impressive glimpses, if you will, and gets the job done. He'll only be older. He'll only have more experience under his belt. And so I'm counting on Caden Prieskorn, and he's still not very high in my rankings, and I can see some guys jumping him. He can also stay right where he's at, if not climb a spot or two. Well, probably just a spot. Next and last guy we'll talk about, Utah's junior tight end, Brant Kuithe, I think is how you say it. Now, he is a junior, but he has been hurt for a majority of his college career so far. He's actually a little bit smaller when looking at his size on paper, 6'5", 235, and actually looks more skinny when you're looking at him on tape. I think he's athletic. When you see him in his build, you better hope he was athletic. Kind of the same thing I talked about with Caden. I'd rather him be big and less athletic than no size and no athleticism. I think it's, you know, same deal here. He's a lot smaller, but he's moves pretty well and pretty athletic. He's actually pretty explosive on some plays when he gets run after catch opportunities and just runs away from guys or is able to avoid something and then just make a bigger play out of something. Like, whoa, you know, when you're talking about explosive for a tight end, it's not like a wow play, but it's like he got more than I expected there. I think his route running looks pretty good within at least like that 10-yard mark. He can plant a foot and get some separation while he's not like all the way up. He has to throttle down, make a cut, whatever. You know, some of that could be because of hip tightness, whatever you want to, you know, put that to, or you're going to put that in a separate category. But I think his route running within that like 10 yards or whatever is pretty good. Plant his feet, get some separation, working one-on-one with a linebacker or even with a nickel corner, you know, just being able to box him out and out leverage him. Look at some of the downside for Kuithe. Just very skinny. We kind of mentioned it. It doesn't really have size and it's tough. I mean, not to look at, but it's tough as a tight end prospect to like some of the athleticism. But when he gets to the NFL, has to add 10, 15 pounds. How much does he lose of that, I guess, athletic profile or ability? Sure, there's some effort and some good blocks against nickel defenders and maybe a linebacker or two. He shows a good, you know, block or whatever, but Kuithe shouldn't block an edge rusher. It just shouldn't be part of his assignment. I don't think it's part of his role in an offense. I don't think he should be a pillar or someone that's sitting in to chip one-on-one against an edge rusher, even on a quick play. He will be on the ground or someone that just doesn't fare well in those situations. His physicality as far as like a tight end goes, he's almost like a strictly big slot, so he can stay on a smaller defender instead of bigger linebackers or someone where he's playing in line and has to work through a few of these things in the middle of the field or some of these high traffic areas. I think playing him out against a Nick is the best scenario you'll have Kuithe in, and there's no one that profiles better in that role in this class than Brant Kuithe. And then Bryson Nesbitt, who I did not add in this video. I did watch him, I had notes on him and whatnot, but I'm not gonna do 6. It's kind of an odd ranking number, but top 5, Brant Kuithe makes the top 5. He's the last one. I have it as simple as this: skinny tight end, big slot receiver, injury history. A few things you have to know about Kuithe, and hopefully he comes back. Hopefully he's good. Hopefully he gets to like 240 or something at the combine, still runs really well, and maybe that'll vote well for him and his future in the draft and as a prospect. But I don't really know how I feel about him. Obviously down here at tight end 5, a lot of guys can be jumping him by the end of the season. This list will obviously be a lot bigger when we're talking like draft time and some of these prospects that have broken out of somewhere. I know Texas has a guy or something. I don't know. I kind of just looked at a list, took some names down, and these were top 5 out of those names. And hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you guys did, make sure to go ahead and leave a like, go down, subscribe, go watch the past content on the channel. It would mean a lot, and I'll see you guys next time. Hopefully my sunburn's like a little bit better and healed by then. So see you guys next time. Deuces.